Welcome to this course introducing the concept of circular economy, circular business models, and policies to drive circularity. The scope of this course covers the emerging circular economy. We will cover what the circular economy means, but also how businesses are creating innovative ways to make circularity a reality and policies can enable the circular economy. It will address things like why a circular economy is needed, where changes in our economies are required, who needs to be involved, what businesses are doing to make the circular economy a reality, and how governments and regulators can support the circular economy. We focus on circularity in these areas because present economies are using too many resources too fast, and we are not reusing nearly enough. Also, not enough of our materials are derived from the resources that we've already extracted or renewable resources. This picture is from the Circle Economy, a not-for-profit organization that measures and consults on the circularity of the global economic system. In 2020, they found that of the 100 billion tons of material consumed in a year, the global economy wastes more than 90%. Only 8.6% of the materials that went into the global economy were recycled and used in the economy again. This represents a significant challenge, but also an opportunity. After all, the raw material and energy used to create the billions of products that sustain our lives also damages and puts stress on Earth's natural systems. This is unsustainable and risky. More and more governments and businesses are now concerned about the increasing pressures on our global resources due to human activities. Consumers, too, are increasingly willing to buy more sustainable products. These drivers create opportunities for businesses that can innovate. The underlying problem lies with our linear economies. These have excessively high material and energy consumption, and large proportions of material end up as waste. Something has to change. One thing we can do is to make our economies much more circular, providing well-being sustainably. A circular economy is an economy where the value of materials in the economy is maximized and maintained for as long as possible. The input of materials and their consumption is minimized, and the generation of waste is prevented, as well as negative environmental impacts reduced throughout the life cycle of materials. We do this through strategies of narrowing, slowing, closing, and cleaning resource flows in loops. Let's explain these a bit more. One strategy is narrowing loops. This is about reducing the amount of materials needed per product or service. The narrowing principle is something we're already quite good at in the current linear economy. It is about resource efficiency, or doing more with less, which is also an opportunity to save costs. Narrowing loops is an essential strategy in a circular economy, but it does not necessarily take into account what happens with the product after it has been used. Can the product be recycled, or even reused or remanufactured? In the current linear economy, many efficiently manufactured products are thrown away after only being used once, and in the circular economy, we try to retain the value of products and materials for as long as possible. This means that we first and foremost need to create products that have a long lifespan, and we also have to make sure that people want to keep these products for a long time. But rebuilding more durable products can actually increase the amount of resources needed for production, so there is a trade-off between durability and resource efficiency in production. But if we design products that are easy to repair, maintain, upgrade, refurbish and remanufacture, the extra resource use in production can be offset by the longer use cycle of the product. In order to put this into business practice, We also need to develop the business models and value chains to support continuous reuse over time, and this is called slowing loops. Through the design of long-life goods, product life extension and service loops of repair and remanufacturing, we can extend or intensify the use of products, resulting in a slowdown of resources used. Out of narrowing, slowing, and closing loops, slowing is actually the most important strategy, but it's also the hardest. This is because it requires us not only to change the way that we design and manufacture products, but also how we use these products in our everyday life. If we can slow down loops, we can decrease the amount of resources that we have to put into the loop in the first place. And we can also reduce the amount of waste that has to be processed and recycled at the end. After many cycles of reuse, we need to close the loop and recycle. It is not enough to only think about recycling the products when discarded, because choices made in the product design can influence if a product can be recycled and the quality of the materials. For example, when materials are not mixed, they are much easier to recycle. Most of the clothes we wear are mixes of blends of different materials, which makes them difficult to recycle. But ideally, we want to be able to separate these materials and reuse them in their original form. Separating materials means that flows are not contaminated and products can easily be dismantled and remanufactured or recycled. These strategies of disassembly and reassembly will be instrumental in closing the loops. In a circular economy, these strategies are combined to create a sustainable flow of materials. There will be some materials, such as toxic substances, that we do not want to recycle and separate these to clean material loops. At the same time, it is important to address these materials in design and manufacturing of the products to ensure that eventually we only have high quality and safe materials in material and product cycles, that is, clean loops. Again, choices of high quality, safe, and regenerative material in the design stage can enable regeneration of loops as they cycle in a circular economy. But how do we put these strategies into practice? The starting point is to take a product perspective instead of a material perspective, and the aim is to set up closed loops in which the complexity and functionality of a product is conserved for as long as possible, rather than breaking a product down into its basic materials after each use cycle. Because it is in the functionality and complexity of products where most of their value lies. A circular economy needs durable products that can be repaired, reused, remanufactured, and recycled, while trying to use fewer and less scarce materials in the first place. Product design is key to enable circularity. For example, design for repair and design for recycling are design strategies that aim to integrate circular economy principles at the early stages of product design. An alternative angle is to maximize the functionality of materials and, whenever possible, switch to other materials that are less scarce or have less environmental impact, while performing a similar function. Some products can even be completely dematerialized and sold as a service instead, for example, streaming of music. Setting this new system up requires a systemic change, a disruption of the existing patterns and habits, a change in the behavior of producers as well as consumers. We need different types of products and services, a new legislative framework, and a strong interaction between people. And digitization and new technology helps us to do this. It allows us to do things we could not do before. It allows us to produce things in new ways. It helps us manage products more sustainably, and it helps us reuse, repair, and share. The circular economy needs new business models in order to translate circular strategies into competitive advantages, company resilience, and successful revenue models. Current business models focus on product sales, which makes it challenging to integrate longer use and reuse in the market approach. So, how do you create value for customers while using fewer materials and conserving resources? And how do you deliver this value if not through conventional sales? Well, these are some of the issues that circular economy is trying to address. The policy context also needs to be adapted to support circular economy. Current policies are still rooted in waste management, but in a circular economy, the very notion of waste is phased out, as products and processes are designed to prevent waste, and residues are transformed into new resources. Waste policies and product policies become linked to each other, and the resulting new policies need to facilitate circular material flows and support the creation of circular businesses. The transition to a circular economy will require changes in the way we live our lives. It will create new patterns of interaction between people and change the way that we own and consume products. Action needs to be taken at all levels of society: industry, citizens, policymakers, and researchers. We will need to embrace a new mindset, shifting from our current take, make, dispose discourse to a circular vision. Transitioning to a circular economy begins with understanding current material flows, supply chains, and the life cycles of materials and products. We need to understand the sources of materials, the steps in processing, manufacturing, and assembly, how the products are used, and finally, the different pathways for the product at the end of first use and the end of life. In this part, we will look a bit more at key terms and concepts like supply chains, value chains, material flows, and life cycles. A supply chain is all the activities required by an organization to deliver goods or services to the consumer. In a supply chain, it's important to pay attention to what is flowing and how materials are transformed from one segment to another and how these are linked. The process of deciding and drawing up which segments that are part of a particular supply chain is called mapping. Mapping helps in defining the boundaries of any supply chain analysis. It shows the processes of transformation and the actors that are part of the transformations. The actors are important to understanding the who of supply chains. Mapping supply chains reveals that they are often complex, non-linear, multidirectional, and interconnected. And this complexity makes supply chains challenging to trace, and this makes it hard to see exactly who is part of it. We have materials flowing, but money is also flowing as the materials are sold and bought from one segment to the next. Similar to a supply chain, a value chain is a set of activities that an organization carries out to create value for its customers. The term is often used interchangeably with supply chain. Mapping a value chain can answer questions about how value is added or lost as products are made. That is, it provides more insight into materials, components, and product flow in response to value considerations. A material flow analysis is a systematic assessment of the flows and stocks of materials within a system. It can answer questions about what materials are flowing through a system. It could be a process, a product life cycle, or even an economy as shown in the figure from earlier in the module. Depending on the focus, it can answer what and how much of a certain material is flowing through a product life cycle. It's also important to consider where the transformational processes will take place. For instance, whether they are specific to particular regions or particular nations, or if they are undertaken across many regions or nations throughout a global value chain. The geographical focus is important because access to labor, energy, capital, or land vary significantly between regions and have a huge impact on costs. Laws and regulations also vary a lot between countries, and this also impacts why and how materials flow in a particular way. In addition to focusing on what is flowing in the supply chain, we can look at the transactions and governance structures linking segments. Global value chain analysis focuses on coordination and control mechanisms to further understand governance in supply chains. Governance arises from the transaction between a buyer and a supplier as they are coordinating and controlling the exchange. So it's important to remember that any value visible in the form of traded materials, services, or monetary exchanges is the outcome of a negotiation. Governance describes how the negotiation of the transaction affects the buyer and the supplier. For example, one partner might be better off than the other due to the conditions or characteristics of the transaction. Focusing on these transactions enables us to find answers to why and how materials flow between segments in the global value chain and what outcomes these transactions have for the different parties involved. And these types of answers are important when material flows and the trade of materials is analyzed. These materials then become products with their own life cycles before eventually being disposed of, and in a circular economy, cycled back into the supply chain. It is important to remember that any strategies addressing one part of the supply chain or one part of a product's life cycle will need to keep a systems perspective. Understanding the complex flows of materials and product life cycles is crucial in moving towards more circularity, as this understanding helps us see what materials are needed, where and why, which then allows us to start thinking about how we can use less materials, use them longer, implement more efficient processes, and find alternative sources of materials, including from those already in use or in current waste streams. The circular economy can help us do much more with much less. It can help reduce the burdens on the earth caused by our material and energy consumption. It can help protect ecological goods and services from the pollution and wastes we generate. It can also help us limit our overall demand for resources per capita so that there are enough for the well-being of all. Many countries are still developing, and they need the resources to do so. The circular economy can help ensure that we secure enough resources for our societies to function and develop. Increased recycling and reuse of materials could help to build sustainable supply chains more resilient to disruptions. In particular, critical raw materials needed for renewable technologies can be used longer in the products and need to be recycled back into the economy. Achieving a circular economy needs the engagement of society, and it will need plenty of invention and innovation. It will also require the creation of new forms of business, new technologies and processes, and new forms of governance. Such changes offer the potential to generate value to society, for example via stimulation of employment and an increased demand for educated and skilled workers. This evolution also needs new thinking, new social systems, new forms of engagement, and new institutions. This demands action from a range of societal actors to realize a circular economy. In the next module, we will look at how businesses can innovate business models towards increased circularity, and in the final module, we will look at how policies can provide incentives but also begin to change systems to transition to a circular economy. Food for thought. Think about your phone. Thank you for listening.